What's your human design? After hearing about the growing field of human design, I invited intuitive human design expert Adriana Keefe to join the Mystical Sisterhood conversation. Listen in today to explore this tool for transformation more deeply. Human design seeks to support you in understanding your unique energy type and life path, the role it can play in the spiritual awakening process, and how to apply what you learn and use it in your everyday life. Teaser, I am a generator with the strategy of responding to life. Join Adriana and me as we explore and embark on a journey of self discovery and enlightenment through human design. Welcome back to Mystical Sisterhood. This is your host, Maureen Spielman. Today, I sit down with Adriana Keefe. She is an intuitive human design expert and speaker who guides women in defining and embodying their sense of self and spirituality, which I love. I'm just going to jump in and say, because we're talking about human design today, that she is a 4-6, if I'm saying it right, manifesting
Yes.
generator. She is a wife and mother to 3 children, lover of animals and the show New Girl, which I love, and host of the No BS Human Design podcast. She works with people through speaking events, one-on-one coaching, group coaching, human design chart readings, and the Human Design Society membership community. So we'll probably refer to these things as we go. But I just wanted to say a really hearty and full welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me here. I absolutely love podcasting, but especially when someone personally asks me, it's the biggest gift to me. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. And just our being willing to trust that this was going to occur when it was going to
Hmm.
occur, because life does happen, and getting ourselves to settle into these seats today and just zone in on your zone of excellence and just what you're here to share with the listeners. I think that we met a couple of years ago. It could have been between 2 and 3 years ago on Hey Mama,
I think so.
and
Yeah.
did a call. I remember being up in my bedroom, and I think there was a desk in my bedroom at the time because of COVID. You related? Just got to know you and can say that I've been following along and following your work and just seeing how you've grown in it too. So I love that, because talking about human design, but also what it means to be a woman in business these days and everything else that we juggle and how we're making it work. But
Hmm.
I wanted to ask you first, did you always know, and I'm making an assumption here, but did you always know that you had a mystical side to you?
That's a really great question. My body knew, my brain did not.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is when I was young, I was raised in a Catholic household,
Okay.
but I had a lot of things happen to me as a child, traumatic events, and it disconnected me from everything. I knew that I never believed in that type of religion, but I tried so hard. I remember reading the Bible when I was a child, and had this body pull that something was there that I could believe in, and it never landed. And it wasn't until I found human design found me that it made me start to unpack, if this is accurate, what does that mean in the grand scheme of things? And that's when, have you ever had that experience where like it's like a remembering? Like
Mhm.
your logical brain is like, this is all brand new. What is happening? I don't get
Yeah.
it. But your body remembers. That's very much what I feel like happens with me.
This is such a beautiful process that
Mm,
you had those rememberings of as a child, and
yeah.
to know it's that reawakening. Something, it gives me chills right now. Something is awakened within you, which is
Yes.
so beautiful to even think that can happen. So was it more recent in your life when you discovered human design? How did you discover it?
It was what I call my quarter life crisis. I was
Mhm.
pregnant with my second daughter. And this is what, if you're familiar with astrology, this is my Saturn return. So I was around 27, 28. And that's when we start to rethink life. Are we doing things right? And at the time, I had a really good career in real estate and I was miserable. So I hired life coaches. And eventually I stumbled upon someone who was more of a holistic life coach, which that was all new to me too.
Mhm.
And she, at some point in our work, introduced me to human design. Now, I was never a fan of like Enneagram personality tests because there's so much room for conditioning. I got 2 different Enneagram results at different times in my life. So I never resonated. But with human design, she just had me put in my birth date and it pulled up all of this information that was so accurate to who I was as a child
Mhm.
before. my environment told me to stop being that person. And so it intrigued me, scared me for a little bit. I didn't touch it for a while, and eventually it shows back up, right? Like it's like these things just keep showing back up. So then I started to lean into it.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah. And I always find it interesting how I remember when I was introduced to the Enneagram, it was in the very beginning of the podcast. I talked about how these women's circles, it was my friend Sue Lucci, and she had led these women's circles. And at one point, someone came in, they loved the Enneagram and brought it in. And it almost like I had a visceral reaction to it because I felt, and this was definitely conditioning, like I couldn't see it with clear eyes. And then I felt like they're just labels. And at the time, I was still resisting against labels. I didn't like them when I was younger. They penned me in and contracted me. And
Yep.
I never liked it with my children. But the things that we don't like often hold messages and gold for us too, if we
Yep.
can see them from different angles and different sides. But it's interesting um, mention that modality because I think possibly if I revisited it today, it might not be 100% mine, but I might see it with new eyes too, which is so cool.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah. And for a lot of people, those kinds of tests work. They tend to work really well for people who are more aligned. And
Okay.
I was a child with a lot of trauma, and I was
Hmm.
very different than who I actually am
Hmm.
today, like who I was designed to be. So I was answering completely out of context from who my actual soul was. So
Hmm.
in that circumstance, they didn't make any sense to me.
And so when you started to look into human design, you said that you started to remember, like, oh, that mirrors parts of my child self. Or,
Yes.
and
Yep.
what was it like? I often think too that when that certain something is ignites our soul, like what did it just feel like coming alive, or that you mentioned like a remembering? What kind of got stirred up in you?
I think at first it was more of that alive feeling. I
Hmm.
couldn't put the word remembering onto it until recently. Then
Hmm.
recently I was able to be like, that's what it is. I just feel like I'm remembering.
Yeah.
And like I mean, weren't we all? I was definitely a witch in other lives. And I pick up a spell book and I'm just like, this actually feels really normal for me. But with this, it was exciting. It was like I finally had a path. So without getting into too much detail, I don't want to trigger your audience, but I was in therapy for, I still see a therapist, but I was in therapy for years
Hmm.
for abuse that I endured as a child. And I did things like EMDR, which helps, but I
Hmm.
still felt like a shell of a human. Like it helped to neutralize the trauma and the flashbacks, but I still had no idea who I was. And when she pulled up this human design body graph, it said I was a manifesting generator. It's someone who is very multi-passionate, multi-hyphenate. They tend to get diagnosed with ADHD as a lot, very energetic, like Energizer Bunny, big energy, big aura. I was like, that was always me as a kid. I was always like in the spotlight too, and I loved dancing. They actually like medicated me at one time trying to dull my energy down. And that for me felt like such validation that I was like, oh, there's something to this. I thought horoscopes were cool when I was young,
Yeah.
like astrology, I wanted to believe in, but I'm also a natural skeptic, which is people are like, how can you be a skeptic in the work you do? I'm like, that's what makes me so good at it because I love the science and the spiritual aspects of
Hmm.
it. So I stepped away for a bit. And then when it was presented to me again, I was like, oh, this really could make me feel alive again. So I like the word
Hmm.
alive.
Yeah. I had a friend that ventured into learning human design quite a few years ago. And I remember she ran a chart, but this was 5 years ago. And I don't remember much. She was training at the time. But I do remember thinking that human design felt complex to me. And
Hmm.
there may be clues in the way I learn because we're all just such different learners. Because I feel like astrology too is so complicated. However, the way that I've been trying or more participating and learning about it is just like really slow and steady and letting people like you or an astrologist worry about the complexity of it because I do believe our minds work in different ways and what we're
Yeah.
drawn to you're going to be different than me, we're going to have overlap, but I think that can be safe to say that it is a big body of work.
It is. I don't know that I'll ever know everything about human design,
Yeah.
but I love to continue learning it. And just looking at your chart here, I see you have what's called definition in your head and ajna. That's like the crown and the third eye in the chakra system. And so for you, you have your own consistent way of thinking about things and processing things. So when people throw new systems or information at you, you might have that feeling of like, well, I already know how to do things through this lens. Like that feels too much. I don't want to take
Yeah.
on that. Whereas myself, where I'm completely open in both of those areas, I'm like, give me more information, almost like the detriment of overwhelm. But I
Hmm.
can see why that would be like, what it would almost make you skeptical from like the taking in information kind of side
Okay.
of things. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, I think so. I know that before we started, you had said, okay, Maureen, I just need the basics of your birth time, place, date. And before we get more into that, what is the history of human design? Where did it
Mm.
originate? And why is it so relevant now?
Oh, I love that. So, human design itself is a newer system. It
Mm-hmm.
was channeled by a man named Ra Uru in 1987. And he wrote this system through channeling for 8 straight days. And he said it was like the worst experience of his life. He has since passed. But all of this information is actually already known, but it combined into one system. What I mean by that is it is astrology, Kabbalah, the I Ching, chakra system, quantum mechanics. It's all of these ancient systems that other cultures have been living by for centuries.
Mm-hmm.
And he channeled a way to make it all a lot. I know it feels like overwhelming to most, but it's a lot more succinct and it's a lot more easily comprehensible on a how do I actually integrate this into my life. So that's why I really love it. I actually resisted studying astrology for a long time up until like 6 months ago because it felt too overwhelming. But human design for me, it's, oh, you are designed to respond. And then it just makes more sense.
Yeah.
But what it ultimately does is it teaches you how to listen to your body's language. It's the
Mm-hmm.
body consciousness. We've all had those times where we said, oh, our gut told us that was a no, and we did it anyway, and we regretted it. We
Mm-hmm.
can all understand that at some point in our lives, our body has told us the answer to something, and then we didn't listen because as a society, we're taught to use the logical thinking brain,
Yeah.
but
Mm-hmm.
that's not actually what we're designed to do. Our
Mm-hmm.
body's consciousness is at a level I don't know that in our lifetimes we'll ever understand. Think about birth, think about conception. Like, how does that actually become a thing? There's so much wisdom in the body that we can't
Mm-hmm.
comprehend. And this is like your true roadmap to success is through the body's communication. So that's what human design teaches you at its core level.
Love that. So beautiful. I was just in a meditation last week where I was introduced to the concept. The good thing about me in this work is I'm not a perfectionist, so it allows me to just throw things out there and play with
Hmm.
them because I think throwing things out and playing with them helps us get to our truth and meaning. But in the meditation, it was doing blessings on body systems like mitochondria and stem cells. And at the very end of it, the facilitator talked about us having, I think it was something like a God DNA, like a God blueprint in our body. That's why I just love this work so much, is because, like you're saying, like in my lifetime, will I ever understand? No. But when you open yourself up to the work, a lot of different concepts come your way and they blow my mind. And I think, like how you're talking about body responses, if it is true to us, and it's okay if it's not true to you and it's true to me or vice versa, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
that we're going to know. We're going to know.
Hmm.
But I love it because how I'm wired or my blueprint, or I can sink into when it feels truthful and so lovely and really comforting and helps me live my life. It
You're
does.
taking back your power, essentially.
Hmm.
We've been very disempowered, especially as moms, when
Hmm.
we know something's wrong with our child and the doctors tell us no, they're fine, and then something's really not fine. We've lost that ability to hear our intuition, to trust our instincts.
Yeah.
And this really teaches you how to take your power back and how to reconnect with the body. Because
Hmm.
if you're anything like me and you had a traumatic childhood, you dissociated from the body. So
Hmm.
I would never feel anything. I would pride myself on the fact that I never cried. Now you could talk
Hmm.
about a puppy and I'll just start bawling my eyes out. But I had no connection there. So that's why I felt so lost, so disembodied, because there was
Hmm.
no connection.
So it's truly, if you had that higher perspective and that witnesser of your journey, you literally can see yourself re-entering your body and taking up that domain again, which was taken away
Oh,
from you.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah. And I know that when you can share with how you work with people, but Like I said, I shared with you my birth date and year, my time of birth, which thanks for pointing out that I was born on an angel number. Because I
Yes.
just learned I was born at 4:44 a.m. probably a year ago because I couldn't locate that birth time. And I
Yep.
finally did it through, I kept on looking to my county in Indiana and I couldn't crack the code. And I probably paid a
Oh.
few times to get it through the county and I ended up getting it through the state of Indiana birth records.
Oh,
So
wow.
for any listener out there who can't locate that birth time, because I know that for my generations and probably before and after, it's not listed on all birth certificates.
No.
And I'm sure you've
Yep.
seen that with
That's the
your,
biggest question I get. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. So I had luck through the State Department. And yeah, so given that microcosm of me, what can you tell and what comes up?
So, looking at your chart, you are a 2-4 sacral generator. So, your type, there are 5 types within the human design system. And I know none of us want to be put within a box.
Mhm.
And there's so many nuances underneath that. But if you started with just like the highest, the type, top 3 things that we'll talk about, you would be well on your way. So, being a generator type, they are the majority of the population and they are the builders, the workforce, life force. Like when you are excited about something, you could work on it from 6 a.m. to midnight and forget to pee, forget to eat. You're just like so immersed in it. But you do have to have that fire for it. If you don't have that fire for it, it's like that empty cup. You need to fill it up with things that you
Mm,
actually love doing, or it will still drain. It's still a battery that will drain. But you have a lot of that builder energy. So you're here to do things. You're a doer, building things. And you have a very big aura that's rather inviting. It brings opportunities to you. When you are able to step back and not force and not initiate and just be patient and see what things come to you.
yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. It's so hard, but it is very magical when you're able to understand that this is possible. You literally have an aura that's designed to call things to you.
Mm,
So all you need to do in the meantime is basic like health and hygiene, energy work, stay in things that make you feel really excited.
mhm,
The sacral part of that, that's your gut. That is the gut response. So to a lot of people, it feels like the belly, but it might not for everyone. And that's a very like vocal, almost yes or no, and excited or like we tend
mhm,
to do a lot of facial expressions and you feel a yes or no, but sometimes it'll go to the head and the head tries to make a decision. But you're actually designed to receive things to respond to with your sacral gut, yes or no, and then move through life that way. Does that make sense so far? Instead of
absolutely.
forcing and initiating. And the 2-4, this is what's called your profile. Profile is probably my favorite part within the human design system. It's very much like your personality. Like they call it the costume that you wear in this life. And the 2 line is known as, listen, these are old terms made by an old white man. They're not the best terms, but hermit is the 2. And what that really just means is your environment's really important. You need a lot of alone time, but you are also known as the gifted child. That's also a very line 2 thing. You tend to learn or know how to do things that you can't explain how you know how to do things. You just naturally pick things up rather easy. Does that make sense for you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Every line 2 you've ever met is has that same smile on their face. Yeah, that's totally me. My husband is, and it drives me nuts. I'm like, how can you do anything by watching a YouTube video? And then that 4 line, this is part of my profile too. This is the networker, the opportunist, the person who loves to make connections. So it makes total sense why you want to host a podcast that's not just you talking, that's you bringing guests for people to connect with. We naturally want to find opportunities for other
Mm,
people through relationships,
yep.
and we find our opportunities through relationships too. So having depth in relationships is really important for us.
That's profound to me because what it does for me as a person who is new to human design. And it's funny because someone ran my chart just recently, like within weeks. And so I only knew the basics. And today you're kind of expanding on the basics. But I had no idea that my type was to respond. And so knowing that is very helpful to me because I since that time of even learning and sitting with it, I can see how things are coming to me. But I wasn't seeing it as that before.
Yeah.
Like these things that maybe they're not, I have to discern and they're not in complete alignment, but they are coming.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so what it's allowing me to then do is be in gratitude for it instead of working on this other side where I am pushing or thinking that I need to know the answers. And of course, you have to do, as we like alluded to before we got on, running a small business is work.
Yeah. Yep.
But how has knowing your type informed your life, like either in work or home life or relationships?
Oh, it is. I know all my kids' charts. I have three kids with all different types, of course. Thank you, universe. And I know my husband's. It has helped tremendously with communication, with giving each other grace, knowing what my husband's strong suits are and what they are not. And so for me as a manifesting generator, the biggest thing that I've really taken with me is to understand that all my life I felt like a quitter because I would get really bored of things and want to start something new. And that is a typical manifesting generator, non-linear life. We cannot do the same thing forever. It is not possible for us. We can elaborate on different things within the same kind of industry, but we just can't. And so, in a society that made me feel like a quitter, like I was never satisfied, that was so deeply fulfilling to understand I need to be challenged. And when I no longer feel like I'm being challenged, I am bored. We do
Mhm.
have to find that balance between reigniting the passion for something. It's like a marriage. It's
Mhm.
like when people start a business from something they love and then they wonder if they don't love it anymore when it gets hard. But you always, it's just like a marriage. You have to work at it at some point. You have to reignite that spark. It's about discerning what's worth reigniting that spark for and what your energy is truly over having that challenge for.
Mhm.
So that was really validating for me. And as a manifesting generator, my husband is a generator. And I mean, he has other things in his chart that make this kind of his energy. But if you give him a list, he great. Like he'll get everything done. He's so productive. If he has no direction, he doesn't really do anything I need help with around the house. And
Mhm.
as frustrating as women are like, why do I have to tell him everything? I'm like, but I have that manifester energy in me where I see like what steps need to be done. Manifesting generators are known as time benders. So like multitasking and getting things consolidated in the right amount of time. And I used to get so frustrated with my husband that he couldn't do the same. But now I understand he's literally not designed to do that. But if I just give him a little list, boom,
Mhm.
he's done. He's great.
Yeah.
So it's really helpful.
Oh, that's cool. And then given the fact that it's based in astrology, and is it because I am more of a baby when it comes to astrology too? I had a really good reading in the last year and I went and re-listened to it and kind of like leaned into like when my Saturn return was and know that Neptune's moving through slowly until early 2026. But is it just that point in time when we're born at the exact hour and minute with what the planets are doing that also create our human design? Mhm.
Yes, that is where the astrology component comes in. So
Mhm.
much like in astrology, your sun sign is your biggest imprint. So what it is, it's these little like electrons that are known as neutrinos, and they are streaming all the time from the sun, from the other planets, and they send messages through our energy. And so
Mhm.
the sun sign being the biggest, you have a sun sign in astrology, you also have a largest imprint in human design as well. The
Mhm.
thing that differs between human design and astrology, human design gave astrology more depth because they also recognized this body consciousness imprint that happens about 3 months before you're born.
Mhm.
So you actually have a personality side of your chart, which is what astrology would recognize when you were born, when the moment your skin comes out into the light. And then about 3 months before, where your body was imprinted while you were in utero, which could be a
Mhm.
whole nother conversation in and of itself that I just love diving into. But
Mhm.
yes, and
Yeah. So that mystical and mystery to our lives. I think that's why I love any of this newer, like deeper work in a way, because we
hmm
can, in many ways, talk about things like our authentic self or our unique expression, things like that. But then when you keep going underneath them and like understanding more about yourself. And
yeah,
like I said before, it just blows my mind.
it's like how your body needs to operate versus how your personality needs to operate. And it can feel like a lot when you're first learning it, but you start
Yeah.
to understand where the differences are, like when your body needs something that's a little different. So I find it really helpful.
Yeah, and it comes from a lens of curiosity to me where maybe we spent a lot of our lives shaming ourselves for the things that
Mm-hmm.
or we weren't achieving, or we may have felt we did wrong or went off track,
Mm-hmm.
and all the ways to feel bad about yourself. But this is a different way of looking at ourselves, I think, because it comes from that lens of curiosity. And so it's filled with the aha moments and the rediscovery. I mean, I think that that healing work is in tandem with any sort
Mm-hmm.
of mystical work. That's how I feel about it. And
Yes.
I had seen the other day something or read in a book. I'm reading a book on Mary Magdalene.
Revealed.
No, it's this one. I
Oh,
think it's by Meg Watterson, I think.
Megan Watterson, yeah.
Yeah.
She might have more than one, but
Was
yeah.
revealed another one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the red one.
That's what it is then. Yeah.
Yeah, I have it behind me. Yeah.
That's what I was reading. And she was saying in the first few chapters that it is like I wrote it down in a journal, the healing that is there for us, the integrating past experiences is the work that also is required. I'll just say it that
Mm-hmm.
way in order to almost remember the truth. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I feel like when I started down the coaching path, it was long ago. I say it was with health and wellness coaching in 2018, but my first like awakening was with Dr. Shafali's conscious parenting, and that's probably like where you and I first, when I was working with that more, and then it went on to soul care and just like so many other avenues. But yeah, that really stood out to me because it's through that work that I've done a lot of inner healing on top of the therapy that I had for years. So reverence
Yes.
to it all. I'm grateful
I'm
for it
I'm
all.
so glad you say that because that was my biggest bone to pick with human
Mhm,
design. When
mhm,
I first fell into teaching it, I actually was like, I am not going to be the human design expert. But
yeah,
then when I eventually became that person, I started to notice there was such a lack of emotional intelligence in the space and giving, really bad readings with negative connotations. Even if you Google things on like the
yeah,
open centers, it's really negative. But there's also no awareness around the fact that like if you have trauma or if you are not, I don't know that anyone is ever a healed person, but if
mhm,
you have a lot of healing to do, that you won't be able to connect to things like your sacral or
yeah,
whatever it is
mhm,
until you are ready to unpack all of that stuff.
yeah,
No one was talking about that in the space. No one was talking about nervous system regulation and how this could make you feel like you're broken if you can't quote
yeah,
hear your authority.
mhm,
And I was so frustrated with it. That's why I ended up forming the work that I do now. It's
mhm,
nervous system, it's
mhm,
healing, it's deep. It's yes, I do chart readings, but it's intuitive and it has depth. It is not for someone who's looking for like a happy go lucky,
mhm,
tell me my
mhm.
star sign kind of thing. It's for the
Yeah.
real work.
I love that. I was thinking of asking you that because when you were talking about in the beginning, learning this modality that was created a few decades back, like how do you make it your own? Because I think for the modern solopreneur, we have our teachers, and yet at first we might feel like, oh my gosh, that's my body of work too. But that may be true. And I think that your body of work, my body of work is meant to come from within me. So then
Hmm.
it's the alchemizing and what were your experiences that inform your work today. And that's what makes it so beautiful. So thanks for pointing
Hmm.
out that's sort of the container of what you can offer somebody. Yeah.
Yes, everyone teaches it so differently, and you don't
Yeah.
have to teach it in the healing way. But I just hope that the teachers out there are aware of what they're saying when they're
Yeah.
translating this
Hmm.
information.
Yeah. Can be inflammatory if it's not
Hmm.
used with reverence. Yeah.
Yeah.
For the human experience, right?
Hmm.
For the human experience. I was thinking about you being like me and that you started a business in the last few years and just bringing to the fore, maybe using human design and how you handle growing your business, or does it make the business, or in fact, what have you found, I guess, as you've started and are growing your own business, and what
Mm.
have you learned about yourself, and if human design has assisted you?
Oh, yeah. Human design is my everyday life now. It is deeply ingrained, although I don't think that's ever fully integrated. I think there's always more work we can do.
Mhm.
But with every decision I make, it is from that place of who I'm designed to be. And I go back into my own chart every few weeks. I have like study times on my calendar that I go deeper into my own work. And yeah, I used to teach it. I have a whole course on human design for business, which I eventually stopped teaching because I am also a Scorpio moon. I require more depth.
Mm,
And it's really hard to teach human design for business high level because
mm,
everyone's energy is so incredibly unique. There's
mhm,
so much more underneath that. But I will say, human design, implementing that as a human translates into my business. So I use it both ways for my business and just for myself. It's automatically relaying that information. And yes, it has helped my business take off. That being said, we all have upper limits. Have you ever read The Big Leap?
yeah.
I
Uh-huh.
love The Big Leap.
And Katie Hendricks, it's Gay is her partner. She was on the podcast a few months back.
She
So
was?
yeah,
That's awesome.
she does a podcast with a woman named Sophie Sheesh, who I had known through a networking group. And so I asked Sophie, and she's like, "Oh, I actually have, I think it's Be Play Love." And so the two of them came on, but he was the one who coined upper
Yep.
limits. Is that
Yes.
right? So can you say
Yeah.
a bit about that?
Oh,
Yeah.
I love it. First of all, it's the easiest read. If anyone wants like a quick personal development book, The Big Leap is so great. But it's when we hit those ceilings
Hmm.
and we all of a sudden we can't make more money, or we're trying to go away for the first time without the kids and all of a sudden the kids get sick. You know,
Hmm.
all these little things that keep our energy from stepping out of that comfort zone. And he calls those upper limits.
Hmm.
Yes, human design has definitely helped make my life easier. It's helped me find more success. And then I'll get to a point where I have to dig again and I
Hmm.
have to heal something new. And it's new level, new devil, right? So
Hmm.
we'll plateau a little bit. And then I have to work through that and figure out what's holding me back. And then it's like it clicks on again. I'm in a space right now where, I don't love the word manifestation because it has such like a negative connotation to
Hmm.
it. So
Hmm.
I call it co-creation. I'm in a space right now. These are all seasons that we go through where I am in wonderful co-creation with the universe. I ask
Hmm.
for something and it seems to just happen. This weekend, I said to my husband, again, line two, I was almost like, I am annoyed that you're so handy because I've never gotten to experience being the wife that called a handyman into the house that
Yeah.
I got to just watch. I was totally kidding, but what do you think happened today while my husband's away for work? Our fridge broke. So I
Hmm.
had to have a handyman in the house today. And my husband pointed out that it was my fault. He's like, you just got to stop asking the universe for things. I
Yeah.
was like, I
Yeah.
know. But it's been so helpful creating that alignment
Mm.
because you do become that more magnetic person. It's not like all positive affirmations. And I
Right.
gave up on that whole law of attraction thing years ago. It wasn't until I became more healed that I
Hmm.
realized, oh, things just flow to me when I'm
Yeah.
aligned in my
Hmm.
purpose.
Hmm.
What?
Hmm.
That's where true manifestation lies.
I believe so too. I remember years ago, I think it was Dr. Shafali who did some truth around we are eternal manifestors. That's who we
Mhm.
are.
Yep.
And so it's becoming one with our truth. And I think the gift of a business is that we try many things and some of them are kind of aligned, some of them not so much, but they allow you to keep on going down the path where you're just coming to that merging of a center line more and more. And so throwing out what doesn't work and then keeping what does and just keeping open and
Yeah.
curious and staying on the path. And the one thing I think for even the listener and see how you identify with it is I think I always used to feel like even my communication with the universe was me here, the universe here, outside of myself. And there was like I wasn't one with it. I had to like plead for what I wanted or say that this
Yeah.
is what I want. And I think what I'm
Yep.
beginning to realize more, and it sounds like just because you're in that direct communication where what you put out there, and even maybe in the form of a thought, it comes back to you. That to me is merging into the oneness with the universe. And I was just saying to this woman healer I was talking to, that I think I used to, like you're saying about the manifestation, for a while, and I've had guests talk about it. I've studied it for years, like thoughts become things and law of attraction. And yet I could write a million affirmations and then, why wasn't this happening? But what I'm realizing now is that it may be all true, but what's going to happen is when you discover your truth, your brilliance, your true uniqueness, your thoughts are just going to become more positive. You're in sync, you're in
Mhm.
flow. So when I'm more in that space, I'm less apt to complain. I'm less apt to look at my life from scarcity. It feels like more of this process to me than having to do this one right thing. It's just like trust the process, keep
Hmm.
open to curiosity and where it leads you. What do you think about that?
Everything. Yeah. Because when we are learning about, co-creation or manifestation from that, like you said, like that pleading energy, it's actually focusing more on what we don't have than what we do. And they always talk about gratitude being the highest vibration. And what I make of that is everything you just said, that everything is all one. We are
Hmm.
actually all one. Our
Hmm.
highest self is actually us right now. Everything is all here right now. Like time isn't real. Like there's all of that. And it's so funny that you're bringing this up too. Within my human design chart, the teaching of we are all one is actually my career. That's what I'm here to do. So the fact that you just reflected that back to me is not a coincidence.
Yeah.
But everything is here available to you if you can think it. It's something that you were designed to
Yeah.
receive. I 1,000% believe that.
And that idea too that when we can think it, energy builds around it. And
Hmm.
recently, I love to see how life is merging now and how my physical life is mirroring my relationships is mirroring the work that's coming,
Hmm.
the offers into my work. But I started a gratitude chain with three friends, and we say five gratitudes, and it's not every, you don't have to pop on every day, but we're pretty consistent. And I think there's something about it where the energy, it just is like, it's like a snowball rolling
Yeah.
down a hill and it's gaining this energy. And then what I see happening is gratitude seeping into my life more and more, where I,
Especially with other people. Yeah.
yeah, and I don't have to force it.
Yeah.
Before, if I started a gratitude journal, I'd toss it out in 3 days.
Hmm.
And so I'd say to the listener, wherever you are is where you're meant to be,
Hmm.
and bless it and be thankful for it because you're in the perfect right place. And the one thing I love about Mystical Sisterhood is just like the bevy of resources that come forth. And so I thank you so much for offering us kind of like a brief but beautiful overview of the work you do with human design and then what you're creating from your soul.
Thank you. I
Mhm.
so appreciate any chance where I can openly talk about all of this because there's not enough spaces for people as of
Yeah.
right now. There's a lot being built. Look at you, look at me. We're creating these communities for people to be able to talk
Mhm.
openly about this and to
Mhm.
not feel judged and to
Mhm.
be spiritually open and spiritually curious without having to feel like they have to label themselves with any one religion or
Mhm.
whatever it is. It's just
Mhm.
nice to be able to find what feels good for you in those safe
Mhm.
spaces.
Yeah, I believe so too. We're recording this the day before a really powerful full moon.
Mm.
And I guess one of my last questions would be, is the moon part of your life? Do you refer to the moon as a she? Is she a guide for you? Or how do you relate to the moon or the
I
sun?
do. Yes. It's so funny. I don't actually, now that you mention it, I don't actually talk about the moon in she context. I think I usually just say moon or lunar, but yes, like every month I have a free virtual new moon circle called Co-Create where people who are spiritually curious can come join us. I think the next one is going to be the first week of November. So that's free to anyone who needs that safe space to explore these modalities and healing and all of that. And yeah, I like charge my crystals out in the moonlight and I do all of that stuff. Yes. And this moon is definitely messing with me a little bit more than some of them had
Mhm.
been.
Mhm. Yep.
But yes, I love the moon and everything that she brings to us.
Yeah, thank you. It's funny. I'm just going to say that we should always trust what comes to us because I swear that I did not look at your offerings and know that you had anything to do with the moon. I just knew that we were in the, I don't even know if it's called shadow when you're the day before, but this
Mhm.
really prosperous full moon. So thank you for
Mhm.
that. And where can people find you? And if there's, before I ask you that, if you care to leave another message or anything for the listener today, I don't know if anything comes to mind, and if you feel
Mm.
complete, that's great too. But sometimes something will come at the end.
So someone behind me has been nudging me to say this the whole time, and I was like, I don't know. And so she's like, here's your chance. When going back to the beginning of this conversation, I was raised Catholic and I felt like I had a lot of trauma. At some point in my young adult years, I couldn't even step into a church. I had lost so much faith. I felt so disconnected. And I never realized how much trauma I had with religion until last year when I started to feel weirdly curious about Mary Magdalene. I started seeing friends were talking about her. I started seeing things about her everywhere. And I didn't even know she was a real person. Like I didn't even know Jesus was real and all of this. So it was all foreign to me. And so I read Mary Magdalene Revealed and I was like, again, the remembering. I was like, why does this feel like remembering? And then I had a Reiki session she's actually my business partner now. We're hosting a retreat together. And she does what's called goddess sessions. And she said, did you know that Mary Magdalene is the energy behind your soul and that Jesus is holding your hand? Just got chills. And that Jesus is holding your hand. And I shut down. I was like, nope, that can't be. And so it sent me into this space where I had to heal my religious trauma essentially and deconstruct what pushed me away from that and learn why my body felt so called to accept the teachings and the lessons of Mary Magdalene. And so for anyone who's listening to this and maybe thinking about their religion growing up or any of that, in my world, I don't know if you've been seeing this yet, we've seen a lot of faith deconstruction. And I think that our communities are very important to hold spaces for that reason, because it can feel very scary, whether you're moving out of a religion or you have a lot of trauma in a religion. And just to note that there's so much more to that religion than we were taught. And I think it's very fascinating. Mary really wanted to make herself prominent in this conversation today. So bringing her up again and maybe go check out her work.
Yeah, and I was just constructing an altar in my front room and I was really craving a statue of her and I was looking at Etsy and I woke up on Sunday morning. That was Saturday and there were some beautiful ones and they were price range and I was like, eh. And my dad had died almost 2 years ago and my mom 8 years ago. So I have a few things left of his in boxes in the basement. And so I went to dig through them. And lo and behold, because he identified as being Catholic really strongly. And he had the tokens in the statues. And I think I can relate to what you're saying about not knowing the meaning. But I took out a Mary Magdalene statue and her crown, her like halo is broken, but it doesn't matter because and then there was a little medallion coin and yeah, keep your eye out, right? She's here and she's here for us. And I'm loving reading that book and discovering her. And I love how you said she's right behind our soul. Yeah, and that we can have a relationship with these words and like Jesus, like God, like prayer. Prayer was one for me. Blessing was charged.
Yeah, prayer and
And
blessing were charged. Yep.
it's like decharging them, like to get the charge, the emotional, because that's all in there. So thank you for adding that on. And now I will ask you, where can the listener find you?
Most of my content goes on my podcast. It's called the No BS Human Design Podcast. So if you're interested in that. And I'm also on Instagram. I do talk to my community through there at Audrey Keefe, ADRI Keefe, or my website, adrianakeefe.com, which I should have mentioned is where you can download your chart if you want to go back and listen to anything we said and see if it's relevant to you.
Oh, beautiful. Okay. I will include those in the show notes. This will be the first of many conversations, and I'm very grateful for you being here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks to the listener, and we'll see you in the next episode. And you know where to find Adriana if you're looking for her. Thanks for listening to this episode of Mystical Sisterhood. To learn more about my one-on-one coaching programs or join the Mystical Sisterhood membership, visit maureenspielman.com or mysticalsisterhood.com. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next episode.